They said she was the last good girl left in her community, and indeed, she was. But even the purest water can become adulterated with dust when left open. Yebu's beauty was charming and very attractive, its youthful innocence. She was the kind of girl that mothers prayed and hoped that their sons would find, and girls secretly envied but still want to remain close and attached to. In a city where virtue had become an old-fashioned joke, Yebu walked through life like a living rebuke. Frowning and genially disgusted at the rampant indecent dressing, mocking empty flirtations, and keeping her heart sealed from careless affection. At dawn, she assisted at her aunt's shop with calm, attractive but dutiful smile. But every day, she was at her real job, a bustling supermarket downtown, and temptation walked on high heels. Still, Yebu stayed pure and modestly coordinated. She had Farouk, her fiancé, the quiet tailor who had watched her grow from a shy schoolgirl to a woman of grace and promising future. Their love was simple, like a hymn that was hummed under one's breath with soft, steady, and unpretentious feelings. He often said to her that her kind was rare and she was the best, hoping that she would not let the world change her. And she would laugh gently and respond, "The world doesn't scare me." But perhaps it should have scared her, because when her admission letter arrived, that crisp white paper from the university announcing she had been offered admission, the wall she built around herself was open to a crack, or maybe, cracks. She didn't know it yet. But that letter wasn't just an opportunity. It was an invitation to the very world she had spent her life judging. And before long, the last good girl in town would become a story people whispered about in pity. At first, the university felt like another planet. The air itself seemed different, freer, wilder, charged with laughter and perfume and secrets. Yebu's first weekend class was like walking into a carnival of confidence. Girls with painted nails and revealing blouses strutted past, tossing their hair like banners of defiance. Boys leaned on railings, cracking jokes loud enough to announce their presence. Everyone seemed to belong to a world she had only seen through shop windows and television screens. She sat quietly at the back, clutching her bag like a shield, her plain long skirt brushing her ankles. When she smiled at a girl beside her, the girl smiled back, eyes scanning Yebu from head to toe. "Are you a worker or a fresher?" she asked, half curious, half condescending. "I work, and I'm just starting," Yebu said softly. "Oh. You look churchy," the girl said, then turned away with a small laugh. That night, Yebu thought about it. Churchy. The word rolled around her mind like a stone she didn't know what to do with. She had always been proud of her decency, why did it suddenly feel like something to be ashamed of? The weeks went by. Classes, laughter, and whispers filled her weekends. Slowly, the distance between Yebu and her old self began to blur. It began innocently enough, a touch of lip gloss from a classmate, a borrowed pair of earrings, a few selfies with new friends. She told herself it was harmless, that even a good girl could look a little more presentable. Farouk noticed first. "You're looking different these days," he said one evening when she stopped by his shop. He was hunched over his sewing machine, but his eyes held quiet concern. Yebu smiled, brushing off his tone. "I'm just trying to blend in. You know, at school, everyone looks so modern." He nodded slowly. "Just remember who you are, Yebu." "I do," she said quickly, though even as she spoke, she wasn't sure if she did anymore. By her second semester, the change had grown deeper. She had made two close friends, Bimp and Kyra, girls who knew how to make life sparkle. They wore confidence like perfume and lived without apology. Bimp was the one who first took her to a birthday party. "It's just fun, Yebu. No one's forcing you to drink or do anything," she said, while tugging at Yebu's hand. "I beg you self, you have to loosen up and live your life small. You've been too serious all your life." And so she went. That night, as colored lights spun through the air and music throbbed through her chest, Yebu felt something awaken in her, that was not just joy exactly, but a strange sweet thrill. She danced shyly at first because she couldn't do the raining dance move. Then freely, and when someone asked for her number, she gave it without thinking, but happy that she had been noticed and admired by someone, or some people. When she got home, it was already past midnight. She sat on her bed staring at her phone screen, at the new messages from a man whose smile she barely remembered. Her heart was tickled with the idea of a little sense of flirtation. "It's just chatting," she told herself. Nothing wrong with that, but little did she know that there was something wrong, something small but real. And from that night on, Yabu began to chase a version of herself she didn't recognize, yet couldn't resist becoming. The next Sunday, she skipped church for the first time. She told Mama Ngortsi that she was tired, but deep down she just didn't want to hear the hymns that suddenly made her feel guilty. By Monday, Farouk noticed the difference again when she no longer called as often. When he asked her, she simply said, "You worry too much." "People change, Farouk, that's life." He looked at her quietly and said, "I know, but not everyone changes for the better." His words followed her like a shadow, but she walked faster, pretending not to hear him. And somewhere between one weekend and the next, Yabu, the girl who once frowned at indecency, began to post her own filtered pictures on social media, her captions full of confidence and hidden rebellion. The same people who used to admire her modesty now admired her boldness. And she, who once pitted others, had become the story whispered in market and among the youth of her church. But destiny wasn't done with her yet, because the deeper she went, the more the world opened its arms, until even Farouk, her fiancé, the man who once knew her heart, began to fade like a name written in dust. Yob had started spending more weekends on campus and study nights in hotel room, group projects, hangouts that stretched into the evening. When she did return home, her perfume filled the small house before her voice did. Mama Ngortsi noticed it all, but said nothing at first. She had lived long enough to know that silence can sometimes be a louder teacher than words. One Saturday evening, as Yabu sat scrolling through her phone, her aunt's voice came from the doorway. "Yabu." "Yes, Ma," she replied, with her eyes still on her screen of her phone. Mama Ngortsi folded her arms. "You didn't go to fellowship today?" Yabu sighed. "Auntie, I'm tired. It's been a long week and I seriously need a rest." The older woman looked at her for a long moment, the makeup, the nails, the blouse that seemed too bold for the girl she raised. She smiled faintly, not in judgment but in sorrow. "When the wind starts to sing sweetly to the tree," she said softly, "the roots must remember the ground that held it up." Yabu frowned a little. "Auntie, I don't understand you." "You will," Mama Ngortsi said quietly, and turned away. That night, Farouk came by, drenched from the rain. He carried an umbrella in one hand and a brown envelope in the other, a small photograph of the house foundation he had just laid in his village. "I thought you'd want to see it," he said happily while sitting down. She looked at it and smiled faintly with no interest and dropped it. "It's nice." He studied the distance behind the smile on her face, the restlessness in her eyes. "You don't sound happy." "I am. I'm just thinking about a lot," she said, her tone clipped. "About us?" She hesitated. "About life. About everything. Maybe I need space." The words hung between them, like wet clothes that refused to dry. "Space," he echoed. "Yabu, I've loved you with all my heart since we ever met, I know, Farouk. Please don't make this harder than it already is, because I have been thinking about it a lot lately. I just need to breathe." He stood there, rain still dripping from his shoulders as his heart became heavier than his wet clothes. He nodded slowly, trying to smile, but the corners of his mouth trembled. "All right," he said. "I'll give you all the space you need. Just don't forget who you are, Yabu." She didn't answer him but watched him leave from the side of her eyes. That night, she uploaded a new photo to her social media with red lipstick, bare shoulders, and a caption that read, "Sometimes you have to lose yourself to find yourself." The post blew up with comments and likes. And somewhere far away, Farouk sat on his narrow bed, staring at the picture that broke his heart more than any word could. Mama Ngortsi saw it too, but she didn't speak because she was far beyond broken-hearted. She only whispered a prayers underneath her breath. By the time Yabu's second year of part-time studies began, she was no longer the same girl. Her mirror told the truth, a sharper face, bolder eyes, and a confidence that drew attention like light draws moths. Her wardrobe had changed, her tone had changed. When she walked into class, she commanded heads to turn. The same girls who once mocked her simplicity now whispered her name with envy. Ah, Yabu Dawn turned fine girl oh. Bimp and Kyra became her sisters in adventure. They knew the right spots in town, the right parties, the right men to talk to. They introduced her to the soft world of attention, free drinks, rich men, compliments that poured like perfume. At first, Yabu pretended she was still in control. She told herself, "I'm only enjoying my youth. I'm still me." But each new night came with new thrill, loosening something inside her. When Farouk tried to call again, she ignored him, and left his messages unread. Her social media, however, noticed her more than ever. Photos of Yabu in new clothes, new restaurants, with new faces, all captioned with bold quotes about living free and owning your story. Her followers grew and her confidence swelled. But behind the filters and flattering comments, something fragile was breaking. One Sunday, while dressing up for a brunch with some new friends, she scrolled through old photos by mistake and a picture of her and Farouk, laughing in front of his shop, showed up. Her heart skipped. For a moment, her reflection blurred in the mirror. But then a message popped up on her screen, "You're the most beautiful girl I've ever met. Can I fly you out next weekend?" And just like that, the guilt dissolved into glitter. Yabu laughed softly and whispered to herself, "See what I've been missing." That weekend, she stopped wearing her cross pendant. She told herself that it no longer matched her outfits. Weeks turned into months. Her life became a carousel of late-night parties, shopping bags, and fleeting attention. Yet, deep down, a kind of hunger grew, a quiet emptiness that sleep, money, or makeup couldn't fill. There were flash moments that was a drawback. Like when she caught her reflection in a club mirror and didn't recognize the girl staring back. Or when a man called her, baby, and she felt a sting, remembering how Farouk used to call her, mine. Still, she pushed those thoughts away. One of her new admirers, a wealthy man named Mr. Kunnel, started funding her lifestyle. He called her his queen, bought her a new phone, and even paid part of her tuition. Yabu felt powerful and adored. Until the day she saw him at a restaurant with another girl who was younger and laughing at the same jokes he once told her. She walked out before tears could fall, with her heels clicking against the floor like angry drums. That night, for the first time in a long time, Yabu didn't post anything online. She just lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling fan while her phone buzzed with messages she didn't want to read. And in that silence, a quiet cry she had buried for too long seized her. She remembered the last words Farouk said to her, "Not everyone changes for the better." The words echoed through her mind until she couldn't breathe. She picked up her phone and scrolled to his number, not deleted. Her thumb hovered over the call button, but she couldn't press it. She had gone too far, and now too pride, that cruel companion of the fallen, whispered in her ear, "Don't look back. You chose this." By the next morning, Yabu wore her pain like makeup. She smiled again, laughed louder, and partied harder. But everyone who looked at her only saw the glow and not the ashes beneath it. And somewhere in the market where she once helped her aunt, the old women still spoke of her with sighs. She was such a good girl, they said. What happened to her? No one had the answer. The world Yebu had chased began to crumble quietly with slow, silent cracks. It started with Mr. Cunnel. The same man who once called her his queen, stopped answering her calls. His messages came late, short, and cold. Busy. Can't talk now. We'll call later. But later never came. Then came whispers that was faint at first but became sharp and loud. People said he had moved on to someone new and younger with more fun. The gifts stopped coming and the attention dried up. And just like that, the doors that once opened easily for Yebu began to close. At work, her manager called her aside and said, "Yebu, you've changed," he said, disappointment clouding his voice. "You come late, you're distracted, and customers complain you're rude." She tried to defend herself, but he only shook his head. "Maybe you should take a break," he said quietly. "Sort yourself out." A week later, she was replaced with someone else at her workplace. The news spread and her friends, Bimp and Kyra, were suddenly too busy to pick her calls. The same girls who once praised her looks now mocked her behind her back. And the men who once showered her with attention vanished like smoke after fire. It was as if the world had taken back every favor it once gave her. One evening, she returned home to find Mama Ngortsi sitting outside, shelling groundnuts. The air smelled of rain and roasted corn, the same way it had been, years ago when Yebu used to help in the shop. She stood there silently, unable to speak. Mama Ngortsi looked up, her face calm but tired. "You're home early." Yebu nodded, her eyes moist. "Auntie. I lost my job." The older woman didn't flinch. She simply patted the bench beside her. "Sit down." When Yebu sat, the silence between them was heavy, filled with all the unsaid things both women carried in their hearts. After a long moment, Mama Ngortsi spoke. "You remember the proverb I told you? When the wind sings sweetly to the tree, the roots must remember the ground that held it up," Yebu whispered, her voice breaking. Her aunt nodded slowly. "It is never too late to remember." Tears spilled down Yebu's cheeks. "I don't even know who I am anymore." Mama Ngortsi sighed softly. "The world is a hungry place, Yebu. It eats beauty, chews pride, and spits out regret. But God," she paused, looking at the sky, "God can still make something new out of the pieces." That night, Yebu couldn't sleep. Her phone lay silent beside her, no calls, no messages, no likes. For the first time in months, her reflection didn't look proud or confident. It looked lost. She opened her gallery, scrolling through her old pictures, one from the supermarket, one with Farouk, one from the church she used to attend. She remembered laughter, simplicity, and peace. Her tears wet the screen. Without thinking, she dialed Farouk's number. It rang and then a voice answered gently and familiar, but distant. "Hello." Her heart leaped. "Farouk, it's me." There was silence. Then he spoke quietly, "Yebu." She swallowed hard. "I just wanted to hear your voice." He exhaled softly. "It's been a long time." "I know. I'm sorry," she whispered. "For everything." Another pause. "Are you okay?" She laughed weakly through her tears. "I don't even know anymore." He didn't scold her. And he didn't remind her of the past. He just said softly, "Come home, Yebu. Come home to yourself." Those words broke her completely, and the next morning, Yebu went to church, not because she wanted to be seen, but because she wanted to be found. She sat at the back pew with her eyes closed, heart trembling as the choir sang, "Amazing Grace." And for the first time in a long time, she wept, not from pain, but from release. That day, Yebu didn't post anything online. She began helping her aunt again at the shop, and her hands remembered the rhythm of work, and her face regained its calm glow. People whispered differently when they saw her, but she didn't mind. Farouk visited one Sunday. He looked thinner, older, but his smile was still gentle. "I see you're back," he said softly. Yebu smiled faintly. "Maybe not fully, but I'm trying to." He nodded. "That's all God ever asks." And as they sat down where their story really began, the silence between them was no longer heavy. It was healing. In the weeks that followed, Yebu often walked past her old reflection, in mirrors, shop windows, even people's memories, but she no longer flinched. She had fallen, yes. But she had also risen, not as the last good girl, but as the first woman in her street that was brave enough to admit that she had lost her way and found it again. And with time, people stopped whispering. They simply greeted her with quiet respect because, in a world where goodness fades so easily, repentance shines brighter than pride ever could. The story of her fall and rise has become a quiet lesson passed from mother to daughter, sister to sister. And sometimes, from one broken heart to another. And whenever young girls gather at Mama Ngortsi's shop with their voices bright with dreams, she listens to them, and sometimes, she tells them her story. Sometimes, she only informed them that, the world will clap for you when you start to fall, but it will never catch you when you hit the ground. And they grow silent, because truth spoken from scarred lips carries a different weight. Yebu learned that evil rarely arrives wearing horns or smoke. It comes dressed as curiosity, as a compliment, as freedom whispered into innocent ears. It smiles first, before it bites. And so she teaches them, guard your heart, because even light can blind if you stare at it too long. She learned too that the love we abandon for the world is often the love that would have saved us from it. For in Farouk's patience, in Mama Ngortsi's silence, and in the prayers that followed her even through her rebellion, God was waiting. There is an old proverb, the stream that forgets its source will one day run dry. Yebu had forgotten hers. But when her life dried up, she traced her steps back to the spring, and found that mercy still flowed. Now, she no longer calls herself the good girl. She simply calls herself the forgiven one. And perhaps, that is better. Because goodness without humility can become pride. But brokenness healed by grace becomes wisdom, the kind that saves others from walking the same path. So, when you hear her story, don't only remember her fall. Remember her return. For every Yebu walking this world, confident, beautiful, searching, there is still hope. Hope that when the world finishes clapping, she will hear a gentler sound, the whisper of God calling her name, saying, "Come home to yourself." And that, my friend, is the lesson of the last good girl who turned bad and became better.